Tony D and Little Joan sitting in my lap, and this is yet another response to a Carl Benjamin video. I don't know if I'm even going to post this, but I thought I'd give it a shot. I've been flagged so many times on YouTube for doing this kind of stuff, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the subtitles to what Carl says. And he's talking about Piers Morgan and Nick Fuentes again. Nick Fuentes again. Smash like and subscribe, etc., etc. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Thanks for checking out the Pineys books 1 through 18, Joan. Available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. Don't forget, book 19, dropping as soon as I get the copyright. All right. So again, let me say up front, I like Carl. I think he's a good guy. I do think he's sometimes misguided. I know he's under a lot of pressure because of what's happening in the UK. I can't imagine living in the UK under those conditions. I just don't know what I'd do. I feel like I'm living in those conditions, only much lighter here in New Jersey, because we have a new tyrant governor. It's nothing compared to the UK. The UK is an absolute train wreck. And I honestly don't know what I'd do if I'd lived there. So I feel bad for Carl, and I don't think he's a bad person. So let me say that up front. So, I think people can have disagreements and not, unlike many other people I used to listen to, I haven't stopped listening to Carl's videos. But I just find it astonishing that he's talking about Nick Fuentes and kind of defending him. Not really, not directly. He's not like a groiper. I'm not saying that. But he's portraying Nick Fuentes here as representative of the Zoomers and young men kind of in general because of what's happened over the last few years, which I think is a huge mistake. I think, and now it's been confirmed. Now, early on, I sensed Fuentes was kind of AstroTurf. He kind of came out of nowhere. Yeah, there was some rumblings on the internet. He had popped up here and there. Styx had debated him. There was that incident where someone came to his house and threatened him. But always it was, he said a lot of terrible things. And whenever I would see the clips, it was like, this guy's out of his mind. So it's not in my view, it's not the idea like this is some edgy Gen Zer who said a couple of things that are kind of just barely cross the line. No, he goes way over that line. Now, you could all say, oh, those are jokes. That's bull. I think that's absolute bull. Now, do I think some of them are jokes? Oh, yeah. But I don't think you know the real Nick Fuentes' actual comments or his actual opinions. I think he'll say virtually anything to dance along that line to get views. On the opposite end of the spectrum, and I do agree with this sort of opposite ends of the spectrum, is Piers Morgan. Now, Piers Morgan is definitely not a reliable source of information, in my view. You can call him a boomer all you want. I don't even see him as that. I just see him as exactly cut from the same cloth as a guy like Nick Fuentes, meaning that he'll say and do anything for ratings. That to me has been very evident from the stuff I know about Piers' career over the years, trying to get scoops. I believe he was sued at least once over steal voicemail messages or something. Now, Carl defends him in this video, you'll see. Let's see how far we can get through this with me reading this. This may not work. At the moment, there's a great dialectical struggle going on. The moment he used the word dialectical, I'm just like, red flag. I think, again, Carl's gone down a bad road after his philosophy degree. This is Marxist terminology, but whatever. In the right-wing space of Western politics, the struggle is between the forces of the previous liberal paradigm, which are colloquially called containment, and a radical right wing that is struggling to burst through the bonds in which it has been imprisoned for so long. That to me is a very polarizing statement, right? So he's basically creating the binary that I think a lot of people outside of this space want to create. This again goes right back to the CIA playbook of going into a country and polarizing everybody, drive them to one of two sides, finance both in the election, and then whoever wins say, hey buddy, you owe us a favor. And this leads to instability, keeps the country unstable enough that you can rule over its people because they're constantly fighting with each other. So, yeah, this is not doing anyone any bit of good. I think both these guys are scumbags. And I think analyzing what they're saying to each other, and like Piers doesn't anymore represent the boomers than Nick Fuentes represents Gen Z. Are some people like them? Sure. Some people. Do some people follow them? Sure. For whatever it's worth that people watch Piers on TV. I wouldn't call them followers. The handful of people who follow Nick Fuentes, yeah, they exist. But as we've seen with this report that just came out, and James Lindsay just posted it not too long ago, it's a NCRI report showing that Fuentes' hits and views aren't organic. He's getting basically AstroTurf, in my opinion. Now, that's not absolute proof, but it seems pretty likely, judging by the patterns. And I, again, since from the beginning, Fuentes is not a phenomenon. He came out of nowhere. Essentially, he was unknown. He was just on the fringes of the internet. And now suddenly he's the biggest influencer ever. Doesn't work that way. No. Charlie Kirk's rise was organic. You know, he started his show, slowly rose up, hit at the right time, and you could see his rise as this slow arch going up. Fuentes, I think, goes more like this. He hits a point and suddenly, boom, he's way up here. That doesn't happen organically. It just can't. There's no reason for it. This is the problem with the internet. It can be gamed to a certain extent. And with his rise, which in my view is artificial, some of that drags some organic amount of followers because some people just want to be involved what they perceive as being the hot new thing. So I think this is all fake. You've got Piers on one side interviewing Fuentes so he can get ratings, so he can further look like the good guy. And you got Fuentes on the other side who's trying to peel off whatever young viewers happen to stumble upon Piers and get his exposure and his credibility up so other people start watching him. Because that's what happens on the internet. If you can artificially elevate somebody long enough, eventually they accumulate a bit of an organic audience. But it's still not really organic. It's still very sort of fair weather friends situation. You look at the Young Turks, I think they were in a similar situation. They had been pushed and pushed and pushed. They didn't really have much of an organic audience. That's why they started out as sort of like Howard Stern show wannabes and then ended up in politics because, I don't know, that's where the money was. Tim Pool actually called it many years ago. Said this is where, you know, the internet's going. It's going to be a hot new thing. It's going to be politics, politics, politics. Now looking where he is, I can't help but And part of the reason I started doing political videos was because of hearing Tim Pool and hearing him say that. And now I look back on that and wonder if, like, did he not say that to get more people involved with the political space and stir up more division? This does nothing but stir up division. I think it's mostly agitprop. Continuing. The recent debate between the Piers Morgan and Nick Fuentes brought the struggle to sharp relief, as it seemed to embody so many of the maladies which plague our political discourse. Not only do we have the last of the boomer liberals represented in the quivering blob of moral insecurity that Piers Morgan, but we also have the immiserated but determined young men as represented by Nick Fuentes. Yeah, I don't see them as representative. I just don't. Nick Fuentes' audience, as compared to the internet, is microscopic. PewDiePie had an audience. PewDiePie had 100 million followers or more. Nick Fuentes doesn't make those kinds of numbers. And, as I just told you, a lot of it's been AstroTurf just to force them up. What seems notable to me about this is that it's only a real right-wing men discussing this debate. I've yet to see any left-wingers or women even notice, let alone care, that this argument is happening. Well, there's a huge red flag right there, Carl. That they're not talking about this. They want it to happen. Because they see this as, oh, we could throw a wrench in the MAGA. Let's get these guys arguing with each other. Not that Piers Morgan is a MAGA guy or anything. But he has said some sane things, during the course of Trump's presidency. I wouldn't call him a Trump supporter or anything, but, he's sort of drawn a line at some point against the woke. Fuentes, I think, is being pushed hard into the MAGA space to destroy it, disrupt it, divide it by any means necessary. Whether or not he'll actually do that is another point entirely. Again, I don't think Fuentes even knows he's being used like this. I think he just fell into this, and he's just glad for all the attention. He's probably making all kinds of crazy money. They don't even seem to grasp what is actually going on here. The debate is taking on the aspect of a father attempting to deal with his angry son, a son who has realized that the world is stacked against him and that his birthright is being given away to people who don't rightfully deserve it. Now look, again, I feel bad for what's happening in the UK. That certainly seems to be the case in a lot of places, especially in Europe. I think that's mostly on the European Union, and I go even farther and say European Union was probably the CIA's idea. They probably at least started it or got the ball rolling, only because I think they thought they'd be ruling it. But who knows? Maybe not. The globalists are definitely in the mix, though. And they want a global government. They want that real ID or digital ID, whatever it is, that's being rolled out now as we speak in the UK. These guys are just there to distract everybody from that, in my opinion. If it weren't for divisive arguments like this, keeping people at each other's throats, they would look at something like digital ID and be horrified, and they'd call their representatives. I don't think you'd have much of a problem with your politics if it wasn't for all these diversions, Carl. When looked through at this lens, it's no wonder that the Western Zoomer is furious with the Boomer for being so cavalier with his inheritance. There's some truth in that, I guess you could say, but at the same time, it's just the luck of the Boomers that they were born when they were born. They were born right on the heels of the biggest explosion of productivity and economic abundance in world history coming out of the U.S., and Europe benefited from that as well. That's just random chance. Before that, you had the greatest generation. What's the generation before that? The silent generation, I think they call it. A lot of those people, I'm old enough to remember meeting a handful of them that would tell me about things like the Great Depression. They didn't have it easy. So it's not that bad. It's not, back in the 80s when things were going great in the U.S., we complained. We still had stuff to complain about because it's all proportionate, right? If you grow up in an era like the 80s, well, you think naturally everything's going to get better because that's generally the drive of human beings to improve things and to have things get better because you saw that arc in the past. So it's difficult to accept that in some extent you're in a decline era. But it doesn't mean that has to be forever. It doesn't even mean it'll happen a year from now. I do believe in Trump's golden age. I just think it's probably taking longer than he wants for various reasons. So in 5 years, a lot of this could not matter if Trump gets enough of his policies in line. Like, literally, this could not matter. Literally, the United States could be so insanely wealthy again, like we were back in the 50s, most of our problems would just evaporate because there'd just be so much money. People would have jobs. They would, their wage, their actual spending power would be high. There would be no complaints because what would you complain about if you were comfortable and you had a house and life is good? Now, the UK, on the other hand, I don't see that golden age coming anytime soon. You guys are much further back in the process, let's say. I hope it's coming for you one day. I hope Keir Starmer goes to prison. I don't know if that's going to happen, but with the right things going, I think he'll be lucky to step down without a civil war busting out in the UK, quite frankly. But my point is, you're talking about an inheritance. You don't get a guaranteed inheritance in this life, ever. Now, in the past, that had happened, right? Your previous generation dies, and they leave something to the next generation, or not. Sometimes that didn't happen at all. There were generations that had nothing and left their children nothing. They couldn't do anything. They were powerless through circumstances or whatever. The world is not coming unglued. There are some problems, let's be honest. There's some bigger problems in the UK, but you don't deserve this inheritance. Like, that's going to be amazing. And in fact, if you got it, whatever soft spots the future generations had, like back in the Gen X days in the 80s, and I'm an older Gen X, I'm 59, I thought I was a cream puff compared to some of the people, who were older than me. I just thought, oh man, these people, they have jobs and families and stuff. I don't know if I'm ever going to do any of this stuff. And lo and behold, I saw my peers at least do it. I didn't really do it too much. I'm different. Don't go by me. But my peers, they did it all, and I just thought, oh wow. So it wasn't true that we were all cream puffs. We just sort of got that rep because we had it easier than the previous generation. Think how much of a cream puff these guys would be if they were inheriting a great economy and jobs and all that stuff. They would be the ones frittering it away. They would be boomers in the making, essentially. So, and you're completely discounting the one major factor in all this. It's true with the boomers, and it's true now. The communists push people in that direction. The belief systems that drove the boomers were partly based in communism, unions, um, this idea of gender equality and diversity and inclusion. All that stuff, as we all know, comes out of communism. In the old days, when the hippies did it, a lot of it was just sort of random. Some of it was necessary. Not all of it. Some of it was the result of technology. The pill changed women's lives forever. But when you're talking about today and you discount the influence of the Chinese, the Russians, the Indians, the Nigerians, especially after what X just recently dropped, where we can see now everybody on X and what country they're dialing in from. Yeah, there's a lot of foreign influence here that I think you're discounting, Carl. When you dig through the sedimentary political layers of the subject, so you can tell when I'm reading Carl because the words get to be $2 words, we find at the bottom of the question that Fuentes and his grapers are in their inarticulate way asking. And that question is, why exactly do women, foreigners, homosexuals, transgenders, etc., deserve the same status, authority, and consideration as the straight white man? Well, I think you're very much discounting men of other races. They've certainly been hit, but sure, some of the white men got it worse. But a lot of the other men got it almost as bad. White men got it the worst, don't get me wrong, but this isn't a total thing of race. This is about globalism. And this is exactly why. I mean, this is all the stuff that the CCP has been pushing for years. Because this is the exact thing that divides us, that gets us fighting like this, that makes us do stupid things. And stupider and stupider people get caught up in this. I mean, what's happened to the LGBT community, I mean, they're completely captured by the commies. Completely captured at this point. It sucks. Now, there's a handful of people in that movement that are trying to push back, but they're not having a great deal of success. But when you make it about the straights versus the LGBT community, the white men versus the other races, you are doing their job for them. This problem is the result of, number one, the globalist influencing your political system, and ours too. You got it worse. We all have it. And I mean, I know you're sick of talking about the idiots that run your government, but they're the ones responsible for this policy. The gays and transgenders and the other minority groups, as much as they might sign on for it, they're not responsible for this. They have nothing to do with it. Other than they benefit from it and go, ha ha, sometimes. They shouldn't. It's making them look bad, and their karma is coming. Their karma is coming. But you can't let it boil over into, hey, white man, let's stand up and, push all these people down, because that's where it's headed when you talk this way. That's exactly where it's headed. And when you give a guy like Nick Fuentes the microphone, he's perfect. He seems perfectly willing to talk that way and stir people up, while at the same time standing by, go, well, I didn't do anything. So I don't know why you would, this guy with his microscopic audience, I don't know why you would give him the benefit of the doubt that he actually represents something. Is there anger out there? Sure. There's lots of anger for young men. And some of it might be in this way. But how many of those guys are going to actually do anything? The answer is a pretty low percentage. Now, they might harbor these resentments, but a lot of them just aren't going to do anything because most people just don't do anything too crazy. They might say something, they might get themselves in trouble, but it's not like they're going to join a group or even express it on most days. I don't think this sort of video is worthy of your time. You got a philosophy degree, man. What we need are answers for these guys. What we need is to call out the Nick Fuentes of the world, the phonies, and Piers Morgan, just as big of a phony, if you ask me, and say, no one should listen to either one of these asshats. Continuing. Contained within this question are many important aspects of society that we are just not used to considering. Who will be dependent upon them? What will they embody with their authority? Are they capable of reproducing themselves in such a way that future generations can benefit from the accumulated social capital that they produce? Not totally processing what you're asking there. I don't think the Nick Fuentes of this world will be in charge. God forbid if they were. I think at best, he's going to be, a dot on the history of the internet. In fact, I think his star is beginning to fade. The pundit sphere on the right is beginning to tear itself apart. And the guys that James Lindsay are calling out as a bunch of phonies, including Candace Owens, Tim Pool, Nick Fuentes, and a few others, they're already starting to go at each other. Today, Ian Carroll and Nick Fuentes got into it. Which one is going to come out on top? I don't give a damn. I hope they tear each other to pieces. Figuratively speaking. I hope their audiences get frustrated and leave them both. There's a million people with opinions on the internet, Carl. Why do we have to listen to any of these? Why even encourage these guys? You have a platform already where you're encouraging young men to take responsibility, to do the right thing. And I get it. It's hard. And sometimes you want to dip into the cultural zeitgeist, but I think this is an artificial attempt at manipulating the zeitgeist. And this is part of the culture war. The stock answer to this question comes, of course, from liberal philosophy. We ought not to hold prejudice against people because of their unchosen properties, as these are irrational, and all rational beings ought to be considered equals in the kingdom of ends. At the base of an ontological question, to liberalism, each man, woman, and other that exist is essentially of the same type, and therefore chains of inequality must be burst asunder in order to usher in the reign of rational equality. I get what you're saying, but I think you're taking this a little too far. What classic libertarians wanted was equality under the law. There's nothing wrong with that, is there? They wanted equality of opportunity. They didn't want to usher in this liberation or equality in every aspect of our lives. That goes down that weird short story. Who wrote that short story? I want to say Kurt Vonnegut or Harlan Ellison. The short story about the guy who was super smart and strong, and society weighed him down and put a bunch of stuff on his head so he couldn't think, and then he leads the revolution. I think it was more Kurt Vonnegut. But anyhow, yeah, I'm against that sort of relentless drive to equality that just creates a bunch of bureaucracy and nonsense. I mean, that's what DEI and woke stuff is, right? But Nick Fuentes isn't an answer to that. He doesn't. I don't even think he cares. I think, like Candace Owens, he's just picked a persona and a side, and he's running with it. Unlike Candace Owens, who picked the other side first, then switched sides to the conservatives, and now has gone off in Alex Jones conspiracy land. So, yeah, again, I don't think any of these guys should be propped up as a being responsible or even interested in what anybody else has to say. I think the only thing Nick Fuentes is interested in is Nick Fuentes. How much money he can get, how much power and influence he can accumulate, and what that will lead to. So, the analyzing him is just helping him in that endeavor, I think. And it was this drive towards rational equality that was stripped the straight white man of his moral authority and deposed us from our commanding cultural position. I don't see it that way. I guess that's a take. I feel like you're obsessed with liberalism. I think you glommed onto this idea that liberalism is the problem with everything. Again, in the UK, I feel like it's a little different. Liberalism is run a little bit differently. And I think there are way more factors here that aren't being considered when you talk this way. I feel like you're reducing it down to a few essential elements to make your theorem work. Continuing, liberalism of all kinds, feminism, intersectionality, socialism, egalitarianism has been drip-fed into the culture since the 60s and has poisoned our blood and made us weak and supine. That's a interesting turn of phrase, in our blood. Again, makes me worried that you're going down a wrong path. I have no doubt that, since the 60s, some of this stuff has been driven into people. And especially since the 80s in the United States, that's when the Marxists attacked our educational system. That's when they figured it all out. That was the best maneuver at the time, so that 20 years down the road, we have kids who are they're completely indoctrinated. Their teachers are indoctrinating. Their college students college professors indoctrinate them. We got a real problem. Don't get me wrong. But I don't see these people as liberals. I see them as socialists. I see them as cult members. They've drank the Kool-Aid, and they're staying. They're staying until Jim Jones tells them to drink the last of the Kool-Aid. And look, you had an example recently of a school in the UK that was closed down. It was, more traditional, and I believe it was a private school, and they made it impossible for them to continue. The government. That's the real issue here. I don't know how to solve that under your system. I mean, here, the solution is usually money. If you can raise enough money, you can pretty much do anything here. We had a situation with a school here. It was a private school, and the local government was coming down, or even the federal government was coming down hard on the school. It would just be a matter of raising enough money to have enough lawyers to take them to court forever, and eventually we would win and have that school. Perhaps there's a similar system in the UK, and perhaps you could raise money, but I think the projects that we're talking about have to start small. And we're behind in this battle against the Marxists. But I do think it's Marxism. I don't think it's liberalism. I think that liberalism is more vulnerable to Marxism and the socialism. Absolutely, 100%. But I think you can draw a line between the two. Here, Joan, you go sit somewhere else. And I think you could draw a big line between Nick Fuentes and the rest of the right. and the majority of the young men, I don't think the majority of the young men even know who the hell Nick Fuentes is. I think he's being astroturfed. Oh, he's kind of cool. Listen, if you're going to be called racist, you might as well say some racist things. I get the joke. I get that it's funny up to a point. But comedy is a very specific thing, and that's something I know. You have to target the right target in a comedy bit, in a joke. And like a guy like Shane Gillis, he's done some pretty edgy stuff in that area. A few other guys like him. But yeah, it's not for the guys like Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is not using a scalpel. He's using a hammer. And he's just floundering around smacking things. And one week he's saying he loves Stalin. The next week he's saying he loves the bad guy from Germany. I mean, it's bad. It's really bad. But I don't think acknowledging Nick's anger, if it's even real, and I don't think it's real, is the answer. It's not his anger I'm worried about. I don't even think the anger's really there. It's always been hard to buy a house, to start a family, and do all that stuff. At least it's always been hard for me. I couldn't do it. But there are people out there, you know, Trump's got trillions of dollars coming into this country. The jobs are coming. They're just going to be different jobs. And they might not be the jobs you want. You know, I have family members, they had to take jobs they didn't want to raise their families, to survive in the world. And there's been people throughout history who do that. These cream puffs are sitting in their cars making TikTok videos about, oh my God, I can't believe my boss is such a jerk. Their anger is very much displaced. They don't really know what hardship is. They probably will never know it. I don't think I really know it, quite frankly. I mean, I've had a few tough times, I guess, but nothing like people in previous eras. And I think the tough times I had would devastate some of these kids. And as we continue forward, assuming we don't have a nuclear war and go into fallout mode, I don't think they're going to have, I think their problems, there'll be generations after them that will look back and go, oh my God, you mean you didn't have internet in your skull? How did you even get on the internet? How did you even think without the AI in your brain? That's so crazy. I don't know if I'm going to read the rest of this, but we'll read some more. And the militant Zoomen are the consequence of our failure. If we embodied a tradition that actually held our dignity as straight white men first and foremost in our own worldview, they wouldn't have to look to historical foreign examples to find it. There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, you know, the dignity of white men, yeah, I mean, it's just dignity, in my view. Dignity of men. I mean, that's a problem. That's a big problem. It's not necessarily white men. Yes, sometimes it's white men, targeted specifically, and I get that that's a little more of a sensitive issue, being in England and being a country that was super white and now suddenly being jam full of immigrants. But again, that goes back to the globalist. And you're drawing this line to Nick Fuentes like he represents your guys. Nick Fuentes doesn't live anywhere near the UK. He lives here. His life has been, by comparison, easier. He doesn't have the oppressive tax system you guys have. In fact, I think he just moved. Because didn't he get threatened in Chicago? He was in Chicago. That's almost an equally oppressive tax system. I think he moved out of wherever he was living, though. And now he's appearing on Piers Morgan, and he was on Crowder the other day. And I echo the sentiments of James Lindsay when he says, I don't know why Crowder touched that dumpster fire. I think the last thing you need are the groypers, praising you for your defense of him. Because I think half those groypers, if not all of them, are mostly AstroTurf. And the ones that aren't, those guys I don't think know what they're doing. I don't think they know what they're supporting. I think they're like the Antifa guys. They just got caught up in the movement because they felt alone and dispossessed, and now they're in a thing, and this is what they do. But just like the Antifa guys, you might get a few thousand of these morons banding together, doing some kind of candlelight vigil or at first, and then turning into something more militant and protesty. But in the end, it's not going to be guys like Nick Fuentes who take the risk. He ain't going to jail. He ain't going to be on the front lines of anything. Although I keep seeing a clip of him at January 6th shouting for people to drive forward. Felt like a very Fed move. Although they say he's not a Fed. I don't know. Speaking of failure, though, it is Piers Morgan that actually embodies this failure in his personal life. Disrespected by his wife, apparently cheated on regularly by her, and a figure of constant humiliation in public. He might be rich, but there seems to be little consolation for the metaphysically desolate life Morgan evidently lives. Well, I'm not surprised by that. A lot of rich people do live that kind of life because they get rich and then they kind of don't know what to do with the money. They kind of don't have any ambitions beyond being rich, and once you get it, you just kind of go, well, I guess I can make more money. But yeah, his wife's pretty hot, and yeah, she seems pretty grabby with other men. I don't want to go through the rest of this. Carl goes into some of that and calls out Piers for calling Nick a virgin. I agree. It's kind of a dick move and kind of irrelevant to the conversation. Excuse me. But again, I think it's kind of irrelevant because these guys aren't really the people we need discussing things. We need people with real knowledge and honest takes to discuss things. So like my dream team debate right now would be Razor Fist versus Sticks and Hammer on the subject of legalized drugs. Because although Sticks and Razor Fist agree on quite a bit here, the one thing they definitely disagree on is the legalization of drugs. Sticks and Hammer wants to see an end to the drug war, whereas Razor Fist sees the legalization of drugs as a bad thing. Now, perhaps I could see two smart guys like that coming to some sort of consensus and really, figuring some stuff out. I can't see getting any information from an interview between Piers Morgan and Nick Fuentes. What am I going to learn there? Who cares that he's a virgin? Who cares about his opinions? He already touted that he loves Stalin and thinks the bad guy from Germany is cool. I think that it's time to dismiss these guys. I said it in a previous video. Just dismiss them. Piers is not an honest actor either. We knew that in the past. You can call out all his humiliating, weird cuckold tree you want. Doesn't change a damn thing. The fact that he lied before. I mean, if he was an honest cuckold, maybe you'd listen to him. But who does he really represent? The boomers are going away anyway, man. Yeah, they got money, but most of them they're done. They're half retired. They're half paying attention. I know some boomers. They still watch network TV news and believe it. They believe it 100%. Every single headline that comes out about Trump, if you talk to them, they'll parrot the opinion exactly as it was presented on regular mainstream TV here. It's very disheartening. But there's almost nothing you can do. They absolutely despise Trump, many of them. And the ones that don't, they are either weirdos off the end of the bell curve, not unlike myself, or they parrot the talking points from Fox News, which are sort of like, well, yeah, Trump's the guy for now. So, Carl, buddy, please, can you, I don't know, can you come up with like a plan, like a real plan for change? Isn't that a better thing to do than this? Like, wouldn't it be great to have step-by-step instructions for these young men to get their lives together, to give up the anger? I mean, that's one I'm a big advocate of. I held the anger on for a lot of years, which is why am the way I am. And it took a long time for me to give up that anger and become like more of a real person. And these guys got way more reason to be angry than I do. And admittedly, there's a lot more reason to be angry these days. But a lot of it's internet stuff that doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter. Nick Fuentes, in my opinion, doesn't matter. He's not a factor at all. Except he's being used as leverage to get a lot of young guys to say, yeah, Trump isn't our guy. We got to go in another direction and screw these GOP. Let's start our own party, and yeah, let's split the ticket. That ought to show them. Right at the point, right at the inflection point when Trump's policies could do some real good. Right at the point of the midterms, which could be devastating to Trump's agenda. It's no coincidence he's appeared now, in my opinion. And again, I don't think he's in on it. He might be getting a check. But these guys aren't stupid. The guys who manipulate the world, they're not stupid. They've got cutouts galore in between Nick Fuentes and whoever's pulling the strings. You're never going to get to him. But I think a lot of people can sense the astroturfing, and I sense it with Nick Fuentes even before they dropped that proof. So that's the reason you investigate these guys. That's the reason you try to leverage the legal system against them. And I think that's the reason you try to build as opposed to this, which I don't think it's really building anything, Carl. We need to build. We need to create, not complain. The dialectic isn't the way to go. And that's it for me, Tony D and Little Joan. Check us out on, I don't know if I'm going to put this on YouTube. It might be too much for YouTube. I don't know. I'll figure it out. Friday, I'll be at Hamilton Elks Lodge from 5 to 9. And then on Saturday, I'll be at Creepmas in Penns Grove, New Jersey, 10 to 4. Don't miss me on Sunday, though, at Thrilladelphia in Manayunk, the new horror bookstore, at 2 p.m., where I'll give my talk on how to hunt the Jersey Devil. Hope to see you there. See you in the next one.